Oh, hey guys, sorry I missed you there. My name is Mel Awesome from Awesome MTB, and we're gonna do Shimano XT 4-piston brake review today. Let's get after it. Phew! Right on, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed a couple of clips of me riding that Firebird 29. I have been absolutely in love with that thing. Obviously, as you guys can tell, it is summer here. We have absolutely no traction. Everything is really gnarly right now. So that thing has been absolutely crushing it out here. And also those 4-piston XT brakes have been keeping me in check. So that's what we're here to talk about today. Those brakes have actually become some of my favorite brakes that I have ever owned, and I am going to tell you why, and also a couple of drawbacks as well, because obviously not everything is perfect, so pros and cons to everything, but let's get after it. So if you've ever ridden Shimano Saint brakes, you know that those 4-piston Shimano brakes are nothing to mess with. They definitely have a ridiculous amount of stopping power, and the same goes through to these 4-piston XT brakes. So stopping power is really good on them, and at the same time you get that XT lever feel from the top. So it's a really nice lever that you're pressing down on to get that stopping power, and then you have an enormous amount of stopping power from the actual brakes. That's something that I really prioritize, especially because a lot of our riding over here is a little bit steeper, more vertical stuff. So as much stopping power as I can get out here is definitely much appreciated. In the past, I used to really like XT 2-piston brakes. However, there was always the drawback in terms of stopping power on those brakes. Number one, you got all of that stopping power all at once. It was basically as soon as you pulled that lever, it was an on-off feeling to those brakes. And the other thing too is it was kind of, even though it was an adequate amount of stopping power, I never really felt like they had as much stopping power as I wanted. So with the XT 4-piston, there's two things there. There's more stopping power over that 2-piston setup, just because now you have 2 pistons on both sides, and you also have a lot more control over that stopping power. And that kind of bleeds into that second thing that I want to talk about today, where the modulation. And like I just mentioned, the modulation is definitely an improvement over those XT 2-piston brakes. So you definitely feel like you have a lot more control of that stopping power. It's not all at once. It's not really on-off feeling comparison to those XT 2-piston. XT 2-pistons are notorious for being a little bit more on-off feeling. Some people love that, some people hate that. For me personally, I appreciate the consistency of that. So basically you get on your brakes and you have the same amount of stopping power right away. However, it was one of those things where the way you kind of modulated those brakes was you got on the brakes, you pressed the lever, you had all that stopping power, and then you kind of eased off them a little bit. Now, it wasn't really an issue, you kind of got used to it. However, at the same time, it's always nice to have a little bit more control of that stopping power, because sometimes when you're going down a super steep rock roll, it's kind of loose on top of it. You might not want all that stopping power right away because it's going to lock up that tire and you're going to skid a little bit. There's a lot of good modulation in comparison to the XT 2-piston, so definitely improvement there. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of stopping power as well. And so something on a more unrelated note is the reason why I love these brakes so much is just classic Shimano ease of maintenance. So if you've ever owned Shimano XT brakes, you know how ridiculously easy it is to maintain them in terms of bleeding. Basically, if you're not too familiar, I'll give you a quick rundown. There's a little funnel system. I like to call this the cheater bleed. But basically you take this funnel, you take that brake lever, and you basically just make it parallel to the ground. There's a little bleed port, you unscrew it, you take a funnel, fill it halfway with mineral oil, you put it on top, screw it onto that lever, and then all you do is you take a plunger out. There's like this little plunger that prevents oil from leaking. You take it out and you just press that lever a couple times and you'll see bubbles start to come out. I am not a bike mechanic, and for me personally, when bleeding becomes too complicated, it's something that pushes me away from brakes because I do have to still work on my own things. So I've always appreciated the ease of maintenance on Shimano brakes. So like I mentioned, ease of maintenance definitely bumped these brakes up for me, and if you're the type of person who you really need to work on your own things, however, you're not the best wrench, and I'm just going to put this right here, public disclaimer, it is okay to admit that you're not a good wrench. For me personally, I know I have a lot of strong points. Being a mechanic was never one of them. And I've been around mechanics enough to know that you're either born with it or you're not. And I feel like being a mechanic requires a lot of patience that I don't necessarily have when it comes to tools. So I'm not afraid to admit it. I'm letting it out right here. I was not born to be a bike mechanic. However, like I mentioned, I still have to do my own work. I travel too much to rely on having a shop or having a mechanic. And I'm also a dirtbag on a budget, so I do have to work on my own bike. All right, so now that I've talked about the things that I absolutely love about these brakes, I'm also going to talk about some things that aren't so great for these brakes, and they might actually make a couple of riders maybe think about going a different route in terms of their braking system. So let's talk about those. So the first thing is, if you're a rider out there that you prioritize modulation, so you're looking for the best modulating brakes on the market, I would probably look elsewhere, because that's not what Shimano XT 4-piston brakes are about, or Shimano's lineup in general. So I feel like Shimano makes really consistent brakes, they make pretty powerful brakes, and they make very easy to maintain brakes. However, I don't feel like they shine in terms of modulation. So if you're that rider who you want a little bit more of an exponential curve to your stopping power, so basically you're going to pull on those levers, you're not going to have an enormous amount of stopping power all at once. However, it's going to exponentially grow as you get more into that lever stroke. I would probably look at a couple other options. In particular, Magura MT7s, I feel like have really good modulation. I feel like you have a lot of control of that stopping power. However, I do feel like you lose a little bit in terms of ease of maintenance, because from my personal experience and as well as Betty's, I feel like they're really hard to get them set to how you want them to feel. The bleed technique's a little bit more complicated. It's not impossible, and especially if you're a good wrench, you're gonna have a good time with those brakes, and you'll be able to enjoy that modulation that those brakes are known for. However, like I said, these 4-piston XT brakes, they don't shine when it comes to modulation. So there are a couple other options out there. And another brake to consider if you love modulation are those TRPs, because I had a chance to test my buddies out, and that control of that stopping power is pretty ridiculous. So those are another brake that you might want to consider. However, for me personally, I enjoy having a little bit more stopping power right off the get-go. Felt like that jump and improvement from 2-piston XT to 4-piston XT was actually what it did for me to appreciate that modulation that these have. But like I said, they don't get an award for modulation. They just are an improvement over that 2-piston XT setup. All right, so the second drawback to these brakes, and this is an interesting one because it might not even apply for you. You might never have any warranty related issues. However, I do feel like Shimano's customer service is definitely not as high as other companies out there. I feel like you get a little bit more customer service from a company like SRAM right now, where I just feel like they handle warranty situations a little bit faster. Now, I'm not saying that's an absolute deal breaker. Shimano does still take care of its customers. However, I feel like you get a little bit more of a rapid response from SRAM, and also a couple of other companies out there as well. So I know Magura right now, they're really taking care of their customers. They really stand behind their product. And TRP is another up and coming brand. So it seems like they're definitely, anytime a company is new to a market, they really want to step up their game and just kind of have A+ customer service. And I just feel like for whatever reason, Shimano's just a little bit slower response time and just certain situations warranty wise, that might be an issue. So for me personally, it's not a deal breaker, just because I'd never really have run into an issue where I've needed to warranty a brake. And anytime I get into a crash or something, a lot of times I need my bike back up and running within the next day or two. So I can either find a replacement part in a local bike shop, or I can look online. And like I said, Shimano brakes are very popular, and they're probably one of the most popular braking systems right now. So there's a very good chance that your local shop has a replacement part for it, or you can just find it quick online. So that's just something to consider. All right, so the third downside to these brakes, and this one actually doesn't really affect me and might not affect you, is if you're a rider out there that rides your brakes moto, so basically flip-flopped, and you have someone who maybe uses your bike, say like your brother or your dad or your sister, and you guys share a bike, or they just ride your bike a couple times a week, it's actually, those levers can't really flip-flop too easily. So unfortunately, you might need to buy a replacement hose to get those things flip-flop, whereas something like SRAM guide levers, you can actually run them on either or, so left or right, which is pretty cool because you can just basically transfer them over. So just something to keep in mind, that you can't run these flip-flops. So if you're a rider out there who, like I said, you run your brakes moto style and you share a bike with someone who doesn't run them that way, It's not that easy to flip-flop those, especially if you've already cut the lines to length. So just something to keep in mind. Right on, guys. Well, there you guys have it. That's my review on the Shimano 4-piston XT brake setup. So I have been absolutely in love with these brakes, and if you're a rider out there that you're looking for a lot of stopping power, consistent feeling brakes that are easy to maintain, and you want to step up a little bit from the modulation over the older XT brakes, then I would seriously consider these, because like I said, I have been in love with them. I've been putting them through the ringer, and they've definitely been keeping my speed in check. I'm also in love with that Firebird 29 as well, so look for a full review on that bike coming shortly. And I hope you guys have been enjoying what we've been putting out there so far. It's been so rad to watch this channel grow. I think this is the week where we hit 1,000 subscribers, and that's freaking bizarre, because when I first started this channel, I wasn't sure anyone was going to be watching. So thank you guys so much for the support, and until next time, ride awesome. You.